This is the fourth and final video on definitions of abnormality, and so we're looking at deviation from ideal mental health. And this definition is different from all the others because the other ones identify kind of what is wrong with people, whereas this one is identifying what is right with people, and so it's seen as a more positive approach. And it was devised by Jehoda, who identified that mentally healthy people possess certain characteristics. She reviewed what others had written about mental health and identified 6 categories that were commonly referred to, which we'll look at in a moment. You'll notice I've put a picture of a fabulous Inuit family there from the 1920s. And I was just looking, like scrolling through, trying to find an image that would kind of display good mental health, and I looked at this family and they just like sprung out at me because they look calm, they look serene, they look strong, they look together, they look really mentally healthy, and that's why I chose that particular photo. Of course, a photo can be very misleading, but we'll go with it for this particular video. So Jehoda's identified these 6 categories. By the way, you don't need to know the name Jehoda, she's not in the spec, but that's who did it. So Jehoda identified these 6 categories and said that if people deviated from those 6 categories, so if people went away from those, if they weren't achieving these 6 things, then that could be an indication of mental ill health. So these are the ideal mental health categories. The first one is your self-attitude, so having high self-esteem and a strong sense of identity. Number 2, personal growth and self-actualization, and you should know the term self-actualization from the humanistic approach. It's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it refers to the very top of that pyramid. When you self-actualize, you have personal fulfillment, you have peaks of ecstasy because you are doing an activity that is completely fulfilling. It's nothing to do with other people or shopping or consumerism or relationships or anything. It's something for you. So, you know, you might have a hobby, you might be a high jumper or a horse rider or whatever you might be, and you might self-actualize in that moment. So it's about personal growth. Number 3 is integration, and that means that someone should be able to cope with stressful situations and be able to like integrate into whatever environment they're in. Autonomy, number 4, refers to being able to be independent and to look after yourself. Number 5 means that you should have an accurate perception of reality, so seeing life as it really is, not in a way that no one else perceives it, and that is really talking about sometimes people have psychosis where they've lost touch with reality, and so this is saying you should have an accurate perception of reality. And number 6, the last one, is mastery of the environment, which means being able to adjust to new environments, including love, work and interpersonal relationships, and adjust to new situations and solve problems. Phew! I can't believe that Jehoda thinks we need to have all of those things going on all of the time in order to be mentally well. And in fact, that is one of the criticisms which we'll look at in a moment. But Jehoda said that if there was the absence of one of those categories in your life, then that would define abnormality, so mental health disorder. So if just one of them is missing, then it's saying that you might have a mental health disorder. And the strength of this particular approach, this definition, is that it is a positive approach. So the other definitions of abnormality tend to focus on the negatives, like what's wrong with someone, whereas this is really showing people what's right with them. Also, the criteria are very comprehensive, covering most aspects of why people might seek professional help if they don't have one of those things. But a really good strength of this is that it opens up discussion about what causes mental health in society and different treatment options. And so that's really positive because it's getting a discussion going about what should be available if you don't meet all of the criteria. And then the next evaluation point is both a strength and a limitation. It's unrealistic criteria, which I mentioned, but that reduces stigma of mental health. So it's a very comprehensive list, but the notion that a person will be able to fulfill all the criteria all of the time is completely unrealistic. And if you think about like self-actualization, Maslow himself said that it was peaks of ecstasy. No one is going to be self-actualizing all day, every day. And so by that definition, we would all be presumed abnormal. In some respects, though, it is positive because it could reduce the stigma around mental ill health and make accessing treatment easier and considered normal. So if it's identifying that all of us could experience mental ill health, then that normalizes it. And so that's really good because then people are much more able to get help that they need. However, not everyone experiences mental ill health. Just because they're not self-actualizing doesn't necessarily mean that they have a mental illness. And then a final criticism is that it is culturally biased, this definition. So deviation from ideal mental health is culturally biased because the criteria are strongly biased towards individualist rather than collectivist cultures. So if you remember number 3 or 4, it was autonomy, which meant being independent and able to look after yourself. According to Jehoda, you had to have that in order to be mentally well. However, independence from others is viewed as deviant in collectivist cultures, and the wider family working together towards a shared goal is the norm. And so the definition is beta biased because it assumes that all cultures are the same. Or it's minimised the differences between cultures and assumed that this will fit when it doesn't. So the definition discriminates against collectivist cultures, and it has the potential to define someone as mentally ill based on invalid criteria for that culture. I highly recommend you do some revision and directed study because this is definitely coming up for the exams in 2022 and could come up on any exam any other time. So I would have a go at a 16 marker. So now that hopefully you've watched all 4 videos to cover all 4 definitions, and so I would practice an essay that is discuss 2 or more definitions of abnormality for 16 marks. And if that question came up, you can either do all 4 very, very briefly, or I would probably do 2 and do the 2 you're most comfortable with. And it's kind of like 2 half essays, 2 8 markers really. So you would need to outline and evaluate both, at least 2 of those. And those are your picture references.